You're listening to Fit Pro Sessions with Parallel Coaching, episode number, I think, Hayley, we're on number 8. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, we're on 8.
Hi, I'm Neil, and this is
Hayley.
And in today's podcast, we're talking about planes of motion. Welcome to today's Revision Power Hour. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a fit pro doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support, and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify, and kickstart as a fit pro? This is the Fit Pro Sessions podcast with Parallel Coaching.
You know, when we started our YouTube channel, Hayley, I never would have guessed, never for a million years would have guessed that a simple 3.5 minute video would become our most popular video over time. We didn't even think about the quality of the sound, the quality of the lighting. We just did it in the front living room. I pulled the camera out, bam, and we started talking about planes of motion. And a couple of years on, this 3.5-4 minute video has reached hundreds of thousands of views and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments from people all over the world saying, you finally made the penny drop around planes of motion. So do you know what? I want to kickstart. I know episode number 4 or 5 on the first revision one back earlier in the week was all about, you know, why A&P is important. But I wanted to jump into one of these subsystems around physiology, not anatomy, around physiology. So the function of our body and talk about planes of motion.
Yes.
Yes. So here we go. So I'm gonna ask you the questions.
Okay.
And
ready
if that's okay. So and I'm gonna try and catch you out. So what is planes of motion?
What is a plane of motion? A plane of motion is basically a dimension. So if you think of something that is 2D, like a cartoon drawing, that only has 2 dimensions to it. We are 3D bodies. We have 3 dimensions to our body that we move within. So when we're talking about physiology and moving, then we move in 3 different dimensions.
Well, we hope we move in 3 different dimensions.
Well, we move in 3 every single day.
We do. I would say majority of the clients I've trained favor one plane of movement over another.
Absolutely.
And that's why they're inactive and sedentary, and for my clients, overweight and deconditioned.
Absolutely. And most of the time we'll find ourselves in a sagittal plane of motion, and that's because it's the plane of motion where we're moving forward. That's our walking and our sitting. The other one is frontal plane, which we don't do as often. You might do it when you're, say, stepping to the side on the pavement when you're dodging people. That's frontal plane, which if you think about, you don't necessarily do that often. And then on the other side,
that's because we drive everywhere. We're not on the pavement.
Well, there you go. That'll be why. And then transverse is when you're twisting. So putting a seatbelt on, etc. And what you often find is that
wiping your bum on the toilet.
That would be transverse to some extent. Yes, that's a lovely image, Neil. But it's also why a lot of injuries that clients have generally come from a twisting motion, a transverse twisting motion. So this understanding of all the planes of motion that we have.
Is that because we don't do enough transverse or train within the transverse? That's why injuries show up?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
If we favor, like you said with your clients, you're in sagittal all the time, and then you suddenly do something that, say, twists, like transverse, all of a sudden, or lots of repetitions of that, say like a cashier, a supermarket where they're twisting all day, that twisting motion is going to cause an injury because it's so rarely trained compared to, say, the sagittal.
So those muscles are overused or misused.
Exactly.
There we go.
And by understanding the planes of motion, you actually understand so much more about the body. So let's say, for example, you do running, you are overusing a particular plane of motion, like sagittal in that case, a lot. Whereas if you're, say, a cashier, you might be overusing the transverse plane more. So there's lots of ways you can look at it, but essentially there are 3 planes of motion: sagittal, frontal, and transverse. I went off on a tangent, apologies.
Cool. So that would explain as well. So as you know, or maybe you don't know, but myself and Hayley have been very much into our running over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So if we consider that sagittal is all about mainly the joint actions are flexion extension of the joints, which create a sagittal movement.
Yeah.
Correct?
Correct.
And running is flexion extension of the ankle, knee, and hip, elbow, shoulder, whatever, which creates us to run forwards. Now, we went into not just ultras, it's off the tip of my tongue. Trail events. There we go. How could I forget that? How could I forget? So we went into trail. So we went from road, which was, quite, I'm going to say, safe and secure predictable. And all of a sudden we now had to sidestep and have some rotation, going over stiles, going round fences, going through gates. And now the impact that had on us was phenomenal, wasn't it? Because we now had to change our style of training to match the demand, specific adaptation to an imposed demand. I hope you listened to episode 4 of the last revision module, 5. 6. There we go. I think it's 4, around the SAID principle, because now we're training specifically inside the conversation of planes of motion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. So training, a major part of it. So planes of motion are 3 dimensions, and understanding those will allow you to help with your training planning as well.
Another example would be that a lot of my clients historically have, as I've said, have been, overweight, deconditioned, sedentary, have a very inactive job, and they live in this, I'm going to say, one-dimensional sagittal world. So they take the least path of resistance. And I found that a lot of clients, because they live in this sagittal world, they neglect frontal and transverse even more. And when it comes to basic tasks, such as mowing the lawn, or getting the washing in, or getting the washing out of the washing machine, where they have to bend down, which is sagittal, but then add a transverse element in and go across into another plane, that's when injuries show up.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why you do need to know about planes of motion as a Fit Pro beyond your exam. So you will get tested it on your exam. So level 2 and level 3 anatomy and physiology, planes of motion will come up.
You're going to get at least 4 to 6 questions around this topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to warn you. There we go.
There you go. And also, like what Neil said, understanding how the body moves will help you understand why our clients get injured doing certain things, or why they're avoiding moving in certain ways. But also, it allows us to understand functional opposites. So in your level...
Tell me more. Yes. I'm intrigued now.
It's probably the main time that planes of motion comes up in a practical session in the classroom that we're doing as part of our PT course. So we're doing a PT course, and we teach the advanced training systems as part of that. And one of the advanced training systems is an agonist-antagonist superset.
So push-pull. So bicep, tricep, leg extension, leg curl.
Chest press, seated row, lat pull down, shoulder press. Pull. So they are functional opposites. That's what as agonist antagonist superset is about. It's so that one set of muscles can totally relax whilst the others are working.
Muscles always work in pairs. That is a rule, a principle of the body.
Exactly.
If there's one muscle, it has to have an opposite. For every action, there's a reaction.
And the agonist will always be the opposite one to the agonist, and it'll always be resting.
Antagonist.
I said the antagonist is opposite to the agonist. It'll always be resting.
Just trying to catch you out.
Whilst the agonist is working. So if you want to work out what a true agonist-antagonist superset is, and therefore have a balanced approach on the body, you need to be aware of planes of motion. So we had a course on the weekend, and quite often people will pick these 2 different, they think, it's a push and a pull, so it doesn't really matter. But they don't necessarily,
I see where you're going with it now.
They don't necessarily get the exact functional opposite. So let's say, for example, one of our learners had a a shoulder press followed by a bent over row. And I was like, it's not really an agonist-antagonist superset.
Because one's gone, there's still shoulders, lats.
Yeah, yes. But the problem, yes, exactly. There's shoulders and lats, but the problem is...
Did I almost catch you out?
Yeah, you did.
Oh!
But the problem is that they're not in the same plane of motion. So shoulder press will be in a frontal plane mostly, which is the functional opposite to that is going to be like a lat pull down or a chin up.
So another way to remember this, I find, is a shoulder press is a vertical push exercise.
Nice.
So I'm pushing vertically. So if you're watching on YouTube now, I'm pushing vertically.
Yeah,
Therefore,
awesome.
the functional opposite has to be a vertical pull.
Exactly.
There we go.
And then the other side of that is a horizontal push, like a press up or a chest press. And then the reverse of that would be the horizontal pull, which is your bent over row, your seated row, etc. So it gives a real clear understanding. If you understand the body, it's not a surprise. It's easy to come up with these supersets. And I find sometimes when learners have jumped straight to understanding the training systems, or trying to understand the training systems,
the funky, sexy stuff of training systems and exercises,
but not grasp the planes of motion at level 2 or at level 3, they end up, it falls apart and they don't understand why they don't get it.
Completely. And then what works very closely with planes of movement is also joint actions.
Yes.
So what's happening at a particular joint, and what is that joint moving through? So for example, Hayley's, this is where I'm going to try and catch Hayley out. So what's happening at my shoulder now as I do a shoulder press?
Abduction.
Abduction.
And your elbows extending.
And my elbows extending. But the point there is I wanted to highlight is abduction. And then when I put the shoulder press comes down eccentrically, my shoulder is adducting. So I've got shoulder abduction and adduction in a vertical push-pull, which is frontal plane. However, if I now went to a bent over row, my shoulder is no longer adducting or abducting.
It's flexing and extending.
It's flexing and extending. And this is the point why it's so important. And I just want to kind of bat that ball home out the park and just say, it's not a case of now understanding planes of motion. I must understand what's happening at each joint as well.
Yes.
If I don't understand what's happening at each joint, is it flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, inversion, eversion, pronation, supination, that terminology, then again, I can't fully understand what exercise to give them, because I now need in the opposite to that. So if I'm now doing a shoulder press, a vertical push, I'm going through abduction and adduction. I now need a horizontal pull inside abduction and adduction as well.
Vertical pull.
A vertical pull, rather.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've got to stay within abduction and adduction of the shoulder in order for it to be a true superset.
Perfect. That's the one.
That's for one.
And also part of this is linked into what you said a moment ago, and in with understanding these planes of motion.
You got a cold today.
I'm not. I'm just a bit a little bit gravelly. So if your client has a sporting goal, for example, like we're talking about running quite a bit, you know that that's primarily sagittal. So the exercises that you choose would be more specific to that goal. It doesn't mean that you can't do the other ones, but more specific to that goal if you chose sagittal-based movements like a lunge or a leg press compared to a lateral lunge, which is a frontal plane. So you can start choosing them specifically. But remember, there is still benefit in doing the others, not just working in one plane because that's the sport that they're going to play, for example.
Cool. I'm looking at our notes. I got my next question. I think we've kind of overspilled into this. So I'm going to ask it anyway. And if there's anything else you can add, go for it. But why do fitness professionals need to know about planes of motion? I'm not just talking about gym instructors, fitness instructors, personal trainers, circuit instructors, kettlebell instructors. I'm talking about Pilates, yoga, aqua, kids fitness, like the whole spectrum of being a fitness pro.
Oh, so why they need to know
why do they need to know?
I feel like we've already answered this, so I'm going to sum it up quickly.
Yeah.
It's not just about the exams, it's also about knowing how the body moves, knowing about your functional opposites and your supersets, knowing your sport-specific actions and being able to match that to the specific goal that you want to adapt to get better at, and being able to observe your clients and knowing what compensations are happening so you can plan accordingly.
Wicked.
There you go.
I like that last point. Being able to actually observe the client. We talk about this on course, and I'd imagine, if you're with another provider, hopefully your provider's talking the same stuff. and you're doing it. But what am I looking at my client when they're on the treadmill, when they're on the cross trainer, when they're doing a shoulder press, and observing? It's not just a case of walking around from 360 degrees and going, oh, you look really good, it looks okay. It's now looking at and thinking, am I working in the correct plane of movement? Am I adhering to that plane of movement? Am I within it?
Yeah, exactly. So
And
if you've got someone running on the treadmill and their left elbow is abducting slightly more than their right elbow, well, you might look at that and go, oh, now I know it's going away from the body, it's abducting a bit more. What muscles might be tight? What muscles might be weak? Where's the compensation happening? Are they now moving in a different plane of motion? And you can start bringing all the information that you've learned together, and that only comes from real good observation, like you're a human X-ray machine.
A human X-ray machine. I love it. I love it. So I did have another question. In fact, no, it's a point I wanted to make. Anatomy and physiology exam at level 2, majority of providers have 50 questions, and at level 3 it's 40 questions.
40, yes.
That
usually,
might vary. There's a couple of providers out there that have 37 questions as well. That's okay. The point is, you can go to www.parallel-coaching.com. No, parallelcoaching.co.uk.
That's the one.
That's the one. I just gave them our old website, which was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Parallelcoaching.co.uk.
Yeah.
Okay, and download mock questions relevant to your course.
Absolutely. And they will include some on planes of motion.
And planes of motions, which means you can practice the type and style and structure of a question and break this down, but also take a second in your revision process and think about what's actually going on here. What are they asking of me? How does this relate to a client in the future?
Yeah, totally.
Boom. So why do fit pros find it so hard to learn this stuff?
I think we've also touched on this quite a lot, and that's because it relies so heavily on the understanding of joint actions. And joint actions taught at level 2 and at level 3. So understanding what flexion and extension is, abduction and adduction, understanding all those different words. And for some people, that terminology and long words are just so new to them. They've not had chance to put that into their body. They've not given it time. And they're trying to just absorb it all in one instant rather than allowing themselves to learn each joint action. Once you've learned all the joint actions, I think it's easier to get your head around the planes of motion because you know how the body moves.
A few years ago, Hayley and I did some work with Tony Robbins. It was amazing. We did a couple of UPWs, Unleash the Power Within. Yeah. We went to Business Mastery with him. We did some other bits, and we did some Tony Robbins coaching. And the one thing I got from all of that was repetition. I got loads of things. Yeah, the big thing was repetition is the mother of all skill.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to learning and revising, it's repetition, repetition, repetition. Even though at times we might feel we've repeated it too much, or through that repetition, we come a little bit bored. And so we don't do it. So if you're finding that point where you're going, I'm still not getting or understanding this, start repeating it, but learn it in a slightly different way. Yeah. Maybe reading about it, you've kind of bored yourself to death. So maybe go and watch something on our YouTube channel to get a different perspective. Go back and re-listen to this podcast so you can start repeating it in a different perspective and have a different message, have a different mode going into your body so you can specifically adapt your brain.
Absolutely. It's what we talk about in our Revision Mastery Bootcamp. We've got audio downloads in there of each of the modules and systems. And the benefit of that audio download is for that repetition. Do
you know what one learner did? I was talking to the other day. What they did is they actually recorded themselves on their iPhone.
Wow.
Reading out the manual. And then played it back to themselves. It was their own voice. They had to get past the point.
I was going to say, that's the horrible bit, isn't it? Is listening to your own voice.
But then they could, on the way to work, they could listen to themselves. And just the very act of not having to read it through repetition, they could now listen to it. They absorbed it really, really quickly. And I thought it was a great way of doing it.
Yeah, perfect. I like that. I want to give a quick learning point about what it actually is in terms of what are planes of motion.
Go for it. Yeah, of course it is.
So just stand up now, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Maybe not if you're driving.
Yeah, no, if you're not driving, don't.
Other than that, stand up. I want you to stand in a neutral position. So this is the position that you see images of muscles and skeleton standing in
the
your manual.
anatomical position.
The anatomical position, that is correct, Neil.
Toes tracking forwards, hips tracking forwards, stand up nice and tall as if you've got a big helium balloon pulling you upright. So you're nice and long through the spine, a nice neutral spine, and
arms are by your side
with
palms facing forwards.
We're in sync.
I
wonder if we could do this the whole way through. We could just say the same thing, be a parrot.
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
So sagittal plane is anything where you've got flexion and extension. So in this neutral position that you're standing in, which is your anatomical position, just move your arms forward as if you're doing a frontal raise. Kind of like bringing your arms up into like this Frankenstein type movement.
How apt, because we're recording this on Halloween.
Oh yeah, there you go. So Frankenstein movement will be perfect. Bring your arms up in front. That's a frontal raise. That is going to be flexion of your shoulders. So flexion of your shoulders and extension of your shoulders when you bring them back down. Also, you could step forward, or if you kick your bum, so bring your your heel up towards your bum. That is all going to be flexion extension movements. They happen in the sagittal plane. And just notice you're moving forwards in space and then backwards in space. That's all the sagittal plane motion. And it's often likened to like a wheel. So if you think a wheel on a car is moving forwards all the time, that's your sagittal plane.
So in the images of the sagittal plane, the pane of glass divides the body in half.
Yes, left to right.
Left to right, cool. So then if we move on to frontal, the pane of glass is dividing the body from front to back, or anterior being the front, posterior being the back of the body.
Yeah.
And then the type of actions, if I'm still in this anatomical position, are?
So this is going to be adduction and abduction. So taking your arms up to the side, bringing them back down. So abduction.
Like a lateral raise.
Yeah, and then adduction, bringing it back down to the side. You can do the same with your hips. And also lateral flexion, so when you're moving your spine side to side. So that is frontal plane motion. I like to imagine I'm being squashed between two panes of glass and then have to just move in that strict place, and that's frontal.
And then the final one would be transverse, and if we had a pane of glass for this plane of movement, it would divide the body
upper and lower. So it's like being sliced through the midsection horizontally, so that it splits your upper body from your lower body. It allows rotation, so you're moving along that rotation line. It includes internal and external rotation of your arm and your hip, and it also includes something that's in a horizontal plane, horizontal flexion and extension as well, which is like giving someone a hug.
Oh, there we go. Do I get a hug?
You can have a hug.
Oh, there we go. And so you've got, I know we've done a whistle stop tour there, but there's loads of stuff on our blog about this, and some wicked vlogs where we've done some extended kind of YouTube edits on this. So go over and head over there, type into the search bar planes of motion, you'll soon find them.
Yeah, exactly.
And is there anything else you want to add, or we should have asked or should have said?
No, I think that really sums up planes of motion really nicely in terms of just a good understanding of what it is, but most importantly, why you need to know it.
Cool. So level 2 and level 3, you must know planes of motion. And then what we're going to do in a couple of episodes' time is actually talk about axis of movement inside planes of motion.
Yes.
Oh, shit.
But, grasp this planes of motion first. Then when we move on to the axis of movement, it'll all make much more sense.
And I'm going to end it here. Send me an email. Send Hayley and I an email. Let me know you're enjoying this. Make sure you give us a 5-star review below, because that helps us bump up through the podcast charts and more people to find us. But let us know. Info at parallel-coaching.com. And let us know what you want in the next revision session.
Fit Pro session.
Fit Pro session. So that's the end of this Fit Pro session. I'm going to jump forwards. I've got about 5 minutes to finish up with today's Power Hour. Here we go.
So how do you learn, qualify and kickstart as a Fit Pro? This is the Fit Pro Sessions podcast with Parallel Coaching.
So let's start with your plan. Set a timer on your phone for 3 minutes and we're going to answer 4 key questions. Question number 1, what specific topic will you revise in the next 20 minutes? For example, if you're on your level 3 anatomy and physiology, you might choose module 1, the heart and circulatory system. Next, question 2, what are the 3 to 5 buzzing questions you have about this topic? Grab a notepad and pen and write down your 3 to 5 questions now. Moving on to question 3, what mode of learning will you use? Is this going to be your manual? Are you going to use YouTube or the Revision Mastery Bootcamp? Are you going to jump inside the cheat sheets, or are you going to go back to previous notes? Question 4, how will you test yourself in 20 minutes time to ensure you've learned what you set out to? Is this going to be a series of mock questions? Are you going to write down 3 to 5 key points? Just know that it's key to test your knowledge on a regular basis. Next, you're going to set a timer for doing the revision for 20 minutes. So set a timer on your phone for 20 minutes and set towards answering the 4 questions from your planning. Once your 20 minutes is up, you've now got 7 minutes to review and have a break. And we're going to answer 3 questions here. Number 1 is write down 3 to 5 key notes that you've learned. Try not to overthink this. Literally write down in short bullet note form to avoid pages and pages of notes. What are the 3 to 5 key notes that you've learned from your 4 questions you set out to? Next, you're going to test your knowledge in 2 minutes and check your understanding. This could be 1 or 2 mock questions. It could literally be a review of your notes and pick out key points to test whether or not you've learned it, yes or no. Again, try not to overthink this. Finally, you're going to set a timer on your phone for 5 minutes. Now you can head over, grab a cup of tea, cup of coffee, a bite to eat, use the bathroom, or head over to Facebook and veg out for a few minutes, whatever you want to do to relax your brain before you return back and complete another 30 minutes for today's Power Hour. Hi, I'm Neil Bergman.
And I'm Hayley Bergman. Over the last 10 years, we've helped thousands of fitness professionals to get qualified, learn with simplicity, and coach clients with confidence.
We're the first to say that learning and being a Fit Pro doesn't have to be hard work, and that with the right structure, support, and resources, you can become a confident and knowledgeable fitness professional that is dedicated to more.
So how do you learn, qualify, and kickstart as a Fit Pro? This is the Fit Pro Sessions podcast with Parallel Coaching.